Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The lake where I lost my brother. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Return. The narrow, winding road leading to the lake was choked with weeds, the pavement cracked from years of neglect. As I drove closer, the air grew still, heavy with a kind of quiet that felt unnatural. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. The lake was just ahead. After all these years, I was finally back. I pulled up to the clearing where the family cabin used to stand. Now, there was nothing left but the foundation, a few rotted beams poking up like broken bones. My stomach knotted as I stepped out of the car, the stillness pressing down on me. The memories came flooding back the last time we were here. My brother was alive. That day still haunted me. The shouts, the splash, the silence that followed. My brother had vanished beneath the surface, and no one ever found him. Not his body, not even a trace. Just gone. And me, left behind, burdened with the weight of 1,000 questions I could never answer. I forced myself to focus on the present, trying to push the memories back. But this place, it hadn't changed at all. The trees still loomed, their branches hanging low like they were whispering secrets to each other. The water, glassy and undisturbed, stretched out before me, as dark and foreboding as it had been that day. Unchanged, unforgiving. A chill crept up my spine as I stepped closer to the shore. The air was thick, heavy, like something unseen was watching me. I scanned the edge of the lake, my heart pounding in my chest. Was someone there? My breath caught. For a split second, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the water, just beyond the trees. But when I blinked, it was gone, vanished, just like my brother. I felt the pull of the past, stronger than ever. I wasn't just here to remember. I was here to find out what really happened, even if it meant facing whatever lurked in the lake's depths. I had to know. I owed him that much. But the lake, it wasn't just water. It was waiting too. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The image of that figure at the lake's edge stayed with me long after it vanished. I stood there, heart pounding, the air thick and oppressive, like it was waiting for someone to make the first move. But nothing happened. Only silence and stillness. I turned back to the cabin ruins, my feet dragging through the dirt, knowing I couldn't stay by the water any longer. Not yet. The town wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes down the road, but it felt a different world. Its once lively streets were now worn and empty, like it had aged right alongside me. Time hadn't been kind to this place. The shops were shuttered, the gas station rusted and fading. As I walked through, heads turned but quickly looked away. No one wanted to make eye contact. They knew why I was here. They all remembered the day my brother disappeared. But, just like then, no one wanted to talk about it. I found the old diner still standing, though barely. The bell jingled as I stepped inside, and the smell of greasy bacon and stale coffee filled the air. A few men sat hunched over their cups at the counter, eyes locked on their newspapers. No one looked up. Just coffee, I said, sliding into a booth. The waitress gave me a nod, her smile strained. She glanced at me like she recognized me, like they all did, but was too polite to mention it. After a while, the door creaked open, and a man shuffled in. He looked older than time itself, his skin tanned and weathered like he'd spent a lifetime in the sun. His eyes, though, were sharp and unsettling. He caught my gaze and slowly made his way over. "You're back," he muttered, sliding into the booth across from me. His voice was rough, like gravel scraping over stone. "You shouldn't be." I didn't bother asking how he knew who I was. Everyone in this town did. "I'm looking for answers," I said, cutting straight to the point. "About the lake." His face tightened. "Some things ain't meant to be understood." He leaned in closer. "People disappear there. Always have." A chill ran through me. "Like my brother." He didn't answer, just stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You should leave while you still can." That night, I dreamed of my brother. His pale face was just beneath the water's surface, eyes wide and terrified, his lips moving in a silent scream. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, but the whispers from the lake still echoed in my ears. Chapter 3: The First Descent. The dream clung to me like a wet shroud, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't shake the image of my brother beneath the water, his eyes pleading. The air in the cabin felt thick, stifling, and I needed to get out. I found myself walking back to the lake, drawn by something I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the dream. Maybe it was the fisherman's warning, still echoing in my mind. Either way, I had to know. The lake was as still as ever, the surface smooth and dark like polished glass. But something was different. At the water's edge, half buried in the dirt, I saw something. Kneeling down, I brushed the earth away, and my heart stuttered in my chest. It was my brother's old compass, the one he always carried with him, a rusted silver case engraved with his initials. I hadn't seen it since the day he disappeared. My fingers trembled as I held it, the weight of it almost too much. How could this be here, after all these years? The air around me felt colder, and the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I stood up, scanning the trees, the water. No one, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I slipped the compass into my pocket, my mind racing. Something was wrong with this place, something more than I had ever imagined. I wasn't far from the edge of the town when I saw her, an old woman, standing by the dirt path, her face lined with age and grief. She watched me for a moment before stepping closer. "You lost someone at the lake, didn't you?" Her voice was soft, sad. I nodded. She looked down at the ground, her lips tightening. "I did too. My daughter. Gone without a trace, just like your brother." She met my eyes, and I saw the weight of her years of loss, the same weight I carried. It doesn't give them back, you know. That lake, it takes. And once it has you, it doesn't let go. I wanted to leave, to heed her warning, but I was too deep. "I have to find him," I said, more to myself than to her. She shook her head, her face twisted with pity. That night, the splashing started again. I rushed to the lake, the sound frantic, desperate. And there he was, my brother, his face distorted, struggling in the reflection. My hand reached out instinctively, but the moment I touched the water, everything went still. I stumbled back, my heart racing. This place wasn't just haunted, it was alive. And it was watching. The whispers grew louder after that, filling the nights, clawing at my sanity. Each day blurred into the next, the line between nightmare and reality dissolving. I wasn't sure anymore if I was being haunted by him or if the lake had its own plans for me. Chapter 4: The Unseen Depths. The lake had me now. Each night, the whispers grew louder, circling me like vultures waiting for the kill. I barely slept, my mind always racing, wondering what was real and what was imagined. Every creak in the cabin, every rustle outside, felt like the lake creeping closer, clawing its way into my life. The compass I found at the water's edge never left my pocket. It was a weight that both grounded me and reminded me of what I had lost. And maybe of what I was about to lose. The paranoia started to seep in like the chill of the lake itself. doors I swore I had locked were left ajar. The scent of damp earth filled the cabin, stronger each night, as if the lake was leaking into my very soul. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, or was it like water? I could never tell. But worse were the footsteps. They followed me, always just behind, echoing on the wooden floor of the cabin. I'd whip around, heart hammering, only to find emptiness. But I knew something was there, watching, waiting. The guilt was getting harder to ignore. Memories of that day played on a loop in my mind, each time the details growing murkier, more sinister. Had we fought that day? Had I pushed him too hard? There were moments where his face twisted and my mind hurt. Angry and a nagging thought bloomed. Did I drive him into the water? I couldn't be sure anymore. The truth felt as slippery as the lake itself, shifting, twisting, hiding in its depths. I needed answers. I scoured the town records, old newspapers, anything I could find about the lake. It didn't take long to uncover stories of people vanishing there, just like my brother. There were drownings, yes, but something darker lurked beneath the surface. Whispers of ancient rituals, sacrifices to something that lived in the water, something that claimed lives every few decades. The more I dug, the more the lake seemed to know. The whispers turned to screams. The shadows darting just out of sight became bolder, more real. And always, I saw him, my brother, just beyond my reach. One night, the pull became too much. I don't remember walking to the lake. My body felt like it wasn't my own, like I was moving through someone else's dream. The water was cold against my legs, biting, pulling. I stumbled, the weight of it dragging me deeper. When I snapped awake, I was knee-deep, staring into the black mirror of the lake's surface. My heart raced, terror flooding my veins. The lake wanted me, and I was losing the will to fight. Chapter 5. Reflections and Revelations. The water's cold grip lingered on my skin as I stumbled back to the cabin, my heart racing with the realization of what I had done. The lake was now an undeniable part of me, a stain I couldn't wash away. Nights passed in a blur of insomnia and haunting visions. My brother's face flickered in the corners of my eyes, appearing in reflections, mirrors, windows, even the still surface of my coffee cup. Each time I turned, he was gone, but his presence remained heavy and suffocating. It was maddening. Was I truly losing my mind? Or was it the lake, drawing me in, feeding off my guilt? I could almost hear his voice calling, urging me to join him, to find him. I was teetering on the edge of sanity, unsure where reality ended and my nightmares began. One afternoon, I found myself at the docks, where the old fisherman had warned me before. He leaned against his weathered boat, his gaze distant, as if he were recalling a darker time. I approached him, desperation clawing at my throat. "You need to tell me the truth," I said, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. "What's happening at the lake?" He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "There's something in that water, son. An entity that feeds on loss, on grief. It's like a parasite, thriving on broken families. It draws people in, makes them think they can reclaim what they've lost. But it only wants to consume you." His words twisted in my gut, tightening like a vice. I wasn't just haunted by my brother's disappearance. I was being hunted by something far worse. "Did it take him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Did it take something from me too?" The old man nodded slowly. "The lake doesn't just take, it leaves scars on your soul. It wants you to linger, to suffer. It wants to feed on your memories." That night, I could feel the lake calling to me again, more insistent than ever. I sat on the cabin's porch, the moonlight shimmering on the surface like a silver veil. Suddenly, the water began to ripple, twisting unnaturally, as if something was stirring beneath. I stood, heart pounding, unable to look away. A shadow broke through the surface, rising from the depths. It was amorphous, shifting and swirling, its shape ever-changing, embodying all my fears. I felt its gaze pierce through me, like it was stripping away my layers, exposing the raw, aching void of my grief. The confrontation felt inevitable. I was on the brink, teetering between the known and the unknown, and I had to decide, would I sink into its depths or fight back against the darkness that threatened to claim me? The lake was waiting, and so was my brother, but I wasn't sure who I'd find if I chose to dive into the shadows. Chapter 6. Beneath the Surface. The lake's call was relentless, wrapping around my mind like a vine constricting a tree. I had stopped sleeping altogether. My days bled into nights as I lingered at the water's edge, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. Each time I stood there, the whispers grew louder, intertwining with my thoughts, feeding off my desperation and regret. The world around me faded, reduced to a blur of shadows and echoes, as I succumbed to the madness that the lake demanded. One evening, while scouring the shoreline for anything that might give me answers, I stumbled upon an old cabin hidden among the trees. Its door hung loosely on its hinges, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the dying light, and an overwhelming sense of loss enveloped me. There, amidst the debris, I found a weathered journal, its pages yellowed with age and stained with tears. I opened it, trembling, the smell of musty paper filling my nostrils. The words jumped out at me, each line a chilling mirror of my own experience. The journal belonged to a man who had lost his daughter to the lake decades ago. He wrote of the same haunting visions, the whispers, and the eerie sensations that gripped him. As I read his final entries, a horrifying realization dawned on me. He had tried to unravel the lake's dark secret, only to be consumed by its depths. The connection between the drownings and the entity was now clear. It preyed on those of us who were most vulnerable, those plagued by grief and guilt. The realization washed over me, mixing with my fear and anger. I was not the first, and I would not be the last. I was just another pawn in its twisted game. That night, sleep found me again, but it was far from restful. My dreams twisted into a vivid nightmare that held me captive. I saw my brother, alive, but trapped beneath the water. His eyes were wide with fear, but also with accusation. He looked at me as if to say, "You left me here. You abandoned me." I woke up gasping, the weight of his gaze heavy in my chest. The truth cut deeper than I expected. The lake had him. The entity had ensnared him in its clutches, and I had to choose risk my own life to save him, or accept that it might already be too late. A cold shiver of dread settled in my bones. The lake was hungry, and I could feel it beckoning me once more. It was time to confront the truth beneath the surface. Chapter 7. Into the Abyss. The weight of my decision hung heavily in the air, pressing down on my chest like the lake's cold depths. I stood at the water's edge, the moonlight casting silvery ripples across the surface, whispering promises and threats alike. The journal clutched tightly in my hand. I felt both terrified and resolute. I was at a crossroads: turn back and abandon my brother to the abyss, or confront the very thing that had torn us apart. My heart raced as I thought of his face, frozen in that nightmarish vision. If there was even a glimmer of hope to save him, I had to try. With a final, shuddering breath, I stepped into the lake. The water enveloped me, icy fingers creeping up my legs, biting at my skin. Each stroke pulled me deeper into the oppressive darkness. The surface above blurred, twisting into a distorted reality. Sounds warped and echoed, creating a cacophony of whispers and cries that filled my mind with dread. As I descended, panic clawed at my throat, but I pressed on. The water became darker, murkier, and I felt as though I were swimming through thick sludge. Visions flickered in and out of focus, shadowy figures reaching for me, faces contorted in anguish, begging for release. I gritted my teeth and fought the rising tide of despair. I had come too far to turn back now. Then, as I reached what felt like the lake's heart, the darkness shimmered and shifted. I was no longer alone. The entity loomed before me, its form a grotesque collage of faces, my brother, my own, and countless others lost to the lake's hunger. Their eyes bore into me, filled with sorrow and accusation. "Why do you linger?" it whispered, its voice a slithering caress. "You hold the key to your brother's fate." I steeled myself against its words, but the truth behind them struck like a physical blow. The entity twisted, morphing into my brother's face, and I felt the anguish boil within me. "You could have saved me," he cried, the pain in his voice echoing through the depths. "No," I shouted, desperation fueling my resolve. "I was a child. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Guilt is a powerful anchor," the entity hissed, drawing closer. "Your memories feed me. Your fear strengthens my grip." In that moment, the truth unfurled before me like a dark flower blooming in the depths. The lake didn't just claim lives, it siphoned memories, twisting them into shadows that fed the very entity before me. It thrived on the grief I carried, the guilt I had harbored since that day. "I won't let you take him. I won't be a part of this any longer," I screamed, my voice echoing through the abyss. With that declaration, I prepared to fight back against the darkness, knowing I had to face not just the entity, but my own guilt, if I had any hope of saving my brother. Chapter 8: The Final Sacrifice. The entity loomed closer, its shape flickering between my brother's face and a mass of tortured souls, all drawn into the lake's grip. My chest tightened, and I felt the weight of my years of guilt press down on me like the water itself, suffocating, dragging me deeper into its clutches. The air, or what little was left, grew thick with the whispers of the drowned, urging me to surrender. The lake had taken my brother, and now it was hungry for me. But I knew, deep down, I understood what had to be done. The fight wasn't with the lake. It wasn't even with the entity. It was with myself, my own guilt, festering since that day. A festering wound that had allowed the lake to claim not just my brother, but my soul too. The visions, the hauntings, the torment, it all stemmed from my inability to let go of the guilt. I had let the lake fester inside me. "I won't let you take me," I whispered, my voice shaking but firm. The entity's face shifted again, morphing into my brother's, his eyes wide with accusation and sorrow. But this time, I saw through it. It wasn't real. It was a weapon, wielded by the lake, using my deepest fear against me. I took a breath, steadying myself, and let the memories flood in the argument that day, my brother running ahead, and the horrible silence when I realized he was gone. I could hear his voice echoing in my mind, but I had to accept that I was powerless to change the past. "I forgive myself," I whispered, the words burning as they left my throat. The water around me began to churn violently as the entity let out an inhuman wail, its shape unraveling. For the first time, I saw it for what it was, a dark, twisted force feeding on grief, on loss, on the pain people like me carried. The water surged around me, the shadows flickering as if to engulf me, but I stood my ground. The lake had no more power over me. In a final, desperate attempt, the entity lunged, its shadowy tendrils reaching for me. But as it came closer, I closed my eyes and let go of the past, of the guilt, of the hopeless search for answers I could never find. And just like that, the weight lifted. The cold grip around my body loosened, and the lake's surface shimmered once again into stillness. I broke through the water, gasping for air, stumbling onto the shore. My body ached, but I was alive, shaken, but free. As I looked back at the water, the reflection of my brother appeared one last time at the edge of the lake, his expression unreadable but peaceful. I blinked, and he was gone. Had he ever been there at all? Or was it just the lake's final trick, the last remnant of its power? I turned away, walking up the path toward my car. I would never know the full truth of what happened to him, but I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer its prisoner. The lake still waited in silence behind me, its secrets buried beneath the surface, but it had lost its grip on me. Forever changed, I left it behind,